Okay, so I'm joined by Tom Kabat, and we're just going to kind of go back and forth here. Thank you for this wonderful forum, and we're excited to talk about some of the on-the-ground experiences we're having. Sorry. So first of all, what is building electrification? The scope of the study for the county involved looking at swapping out gas furnaces, dryers, ranges, water heaters, and installing EV chargers. And that's where you're going to have the biggest impact for decarbonizing a home. We also looked at rooftop solar and batteries, and those really provide resilience and cost reduction, especially with solar, because solar is so cheap. Okay, so I think Susan touched on this with the study goals were to learn about the costs and strategies for decarbonizing existing homes in San Mateo County. What is the cost? Does a plan help homeowners? And what can we learn from assisting homeowners in electrifying? We took a fair amount of time to try to find homes that were, we thought, representative of the county. So from Half Moon Bay and Pescadero over on the coast, over to East Palo Alto near the bay, and north and south, we tried to kind of capture all of our interesting microclimates, even here within the county. And we wanted to get a representative population of home, looking at the home vintage. So the homes ranged from kind of close to turn of the century to 1990s in terms of home vintage. The sizes ranged from as small as around 1,000 square feet up to, I think our largest was around 2,500 square feet. And panel sizes also ranged. We thought we might get a 60 amp panel, but when we went on site, it actually turned out to be a 100 amp panel. So right now, our panels range from 100 amps up to, I think 300 amps is our largest one. And then income level, we wanted to make sure that we had at least 2 low-income homeowners in the project. And we used their participation in our CARE program, the PG&E bill assistance program, as sort of a proxy for their income level. Okay, Tom, do you want to talk about sort of the steps?
Yeah, so we've got a multi-step process. The 78 homeowners had applied, kind of self-selected into this by answering some survey questions about their homes and what kind of projects they've done so far and what else they were interested in. We culled that down to the 10 or so homes to call and do these 45-minute interviews. So before scheduling a site visit, Josie and I would call them and introduce ourselves over a Zoom call, talk about the project and learn about the home. Really kind of getting into questions about how they're enjoying the systems they have in their home and what kind of problems they're detecting with what they've got and what they want to be doing. And so we kind of learn some of their priorities in that call. Then we schedule a site visit. We go out and visit the site for about 2 hours, typically. The first hour roughly is spent on the outside doing measurements and looking at things. So the measurements are the measuring kind of the surface area of the building to do a heat loss calculation, a regular manual J type of thing. So window sizes and orientations and wall sizes, etc. Also then looking a lot at the electric panel, trying to figure out what is the service size coming into it, the disconnect size, the panel size, the various circuit breakers, and heading out to sub panels and other things. So we try to figure that out. We're also looking at that point too for what might be the locations for putting the heat pump compressor. For a typical heat pump HVAC, it's got an outside unit, kind of like a big suitcase that we need to find a spot for, typically within about a foot of the home. And those are subject to side yard setback constraints, things like that. So we're looking around for that, looking also at the roof, trying to see where solar might go and exploring that. Then the other hour is spent in the home and garage, checking out the garage to see what the water heater situation might be like, the laundry situation, where heat pump water heater condensate, that little bit of distilled water we get from the air. when we cool it with a heat pump water heater, where that might go, and kind of planning what is the circuit routing that you would do to run the circuits from the electrical panel to the location of the different devices. So we look at that, take plenty of pictures, and then also go into the house and look at the nameplate ratings on the attached equipment. And that's useful for the electric code sizing requirements on the panel, because we're able to take a look at how this all fits on their panel. All right, thanks.
Okay, so just to kind of jump in here, I just wanted to maybe go over the whole process so you can see where we are. Tom and I so far have done 8 home sites or home visits out of the 10. And we're beginning to get, we've developed these contractor bid packets for 3 of the 8. And then sent out the contractor bid packets to those contractors and are just starting to get those bids back. So we don't have definitive cost information to share yet, but both Tom and I have electrified our own homes, so we're happy to share some of our own experiences. What's remaining is reviewing all those bids, running financial projections, and then presenting an overall plan to the homeowner, and then writing up the final case study. Okay, so I want to jump into one home, and that's the home of Catherine Wolf, who will be on the call with us a little bit later. So in the Wolf home, it's a 1900 square foot house. The vintage is 1960s. There are 4 occupants in the home, and the panel starting out was very typical for this era of home in the Bay Area, which is a 100 amp panel. So really quickly, an amp diet. This is critical, and it's not well understood, but it comes from the code, the National Electrical Code, which provides different ways to calculate, to do load calculations for an electrical panel. We've found that there are ways, equipment choices that can be made, and we'll cover this later, that allow you to stay on your existing 100 amp panel and fully electrify. So that includes EV, that includes space heating, water heating, adding solar, electric drying, and electric range. And this diagram to the right shows you exactly how to do that. But it does require making sure you pick the right appliances. So for example, if you picked a 30 amp heat pump water heater, you wouldn't be able to do this. But if you pick a 15 amp heat pump water heater, you can do it pretty easily. So one of the goals that Tom and I have had is to help people try to save the $10,000 to $20,000 in the panel upsizing by making sure they make the right equipment choices. All right, so let's jump into, this is the Wolf home. Here's the water heater on the left as it exists today. It's a 50-gallon gas water heater, reaching the end of its useful life. So it's a good time actually to be thinking about replacing it. Instead of the existing water heater, we're recommending an 80-gallon water heater, which again is a 15 amp version. Rheem makes a 30 amp version, but we would stay away from that because it would make us go over the panel amperage. So with the 15 amp water heater, it delivers, has great delivery of hot water. Takes a little bit longer than the 30 amp version. The 30 amp version has resistor strips that can do like a lot of boost heating if you were to run low, but the 15 amp still has some of that boost capability. So this would be a recommendation there. On the space cooling, what we found was an existing air conditioner, and you can see sort of a typical, what these look like. It's a Train brand, and then an indoor gas furnace. So this is very common for people in the Bay Area who have in the past, let's say 20 years, added an air conditioner. Going forward, you can see the best solution, which is here on the right, which is a heat pump, which does both. So it has that outdoor compressor equipment, which has a little bit of a different form factor in this case, smaller actually. But the indoor part, an air handler, goes where the furnace is. So in terms of what the customer experience is, they would still get the same heating and cooling. The outdoor compressor would be smaller and much quieter. And it would use, all of this would use a lot less electricity than the current air conditioner, which is just older. So this Mitsubishi 3-ton inverter driven heat pump on the right is a really nice piece of equipment. Inverter driven means it can modulate up and down in terms of the power. And it can, it's also extremely quiet. So that's one concern for people who are putting these in their side yards. The older kind of American equipment that's less efficient is more of a concern on the sound. But these, the Mitsubishi 3-ton or Mitsubishi inverter driven heat pumps are very quiet. And actually I have this exact model in my home on the right. To install this version in my home cost $10,500. I got, quotes that were less than that for different pieces of equipment, more like the American versions. And those were as low as $8,500. But just so you can understand about what the cost range would be for this type of equipment. Okay, so in the home, we found a 48-inch gas range on the left. It was interesting when I was looking, the homeowner did not purchase this. It was in the home when they bought it. But I was looking at sort of replacement value to compare the two because the induction version on the right, which is an AGA induction range, was looking very expensive to me at $7,500 for that piece of equipment. When I looked at the JennAir to replace that gas range, it was $9,500. So in fact, if you were, if you reach the end of the useful life of the stove on the left and we're looking to replace it with gas versus induction, you'd actually save money going with the induction, which was a little surprising to me, but yeah, that was the case. Okay. Clothes drying, they actually had an electric clothes dryer. And so you might ask, why would we recommend that they replace their dryer? In this case, it was because the amperage of the resistance dryer, the resistance electric dryer, was high at 22.5 amps. These can go as high as 26 or 30 amps. And just to give you a little bit of comparison, I think I don't know if I mentioned this, but the 3-ton, this Mitsubishi heat pump space heater on the right runs on 17 amps at 240 volts. So it's very, very easy on your electrical panel and easy on the grid. So that can heat an entire home up to 2,000 square feet with this device that uses only 17 amps. And then looking at this dryer on the left, so this existing dryer, you can see it's 22.5 amps, 240 volts. So it was just interesting for me to see that you would use the same amount of actually more power to dry your clothes as you would to heat an entire house. So those are the old electric resistance dryer. They're huge energy hogs. So in this case, we recommended switching to a more efficient heat pump dryer, which is made by Whirlpool. It's the same size, pretty much the same drum size, 7.4 cubic feet. There are some European models of heat pump dryers that are much smaller. They're 4.3 cubic feet. And with a small family, we weren't sure that would work. So we decided to stick with the larger heat pump dryer.
Time check. You have a couple more minutes, Josie.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so with EV charging, one mistake we see people making is that they install huge EV chargers, so 50 amp car chargers. In this case, we recommended a 30 amp, which will be plenty. That would provide something like 200 miles of charging overnight, charging for 10 hours overnight. So that's one thing where someone can really save a lot in terms of not having to upgrade their panel, is choosing a smaller car charging circuit. We also recommended a 5.8 kW rooftop solar system and a 20 kilowatt hour battery system for the home. That will really reduce their utility bills, and the battery will provide resilience. We also recommended some building shell improvements in order to keep that tonnage on the HVAC system low. So going from, they already had R19 in the attic, but we recommended going up to R38 and then adding, they have no insulation in the floor, so adding floor insulation, and then redoing the ductwork, which we figured would not pass the HERS test. Okay, I'm going to skip that one. Here's an example of the contractor bid packet that we provide to contractors. It has the quote request with all the projects listed on the left, a complete set of 9 or so drawings of all of the different projects, each project separately and then all together that we're requesting from the contractors. And then on the right, the load calculations for the panel and how it would all fit on their electrical panel. So in this home, the things that were not in scope were converting the pool heater and the gas fireplace. Those things, adding the pool heater would require a panel upgrade, but it would require only about a 50 amp upgrade to the panel. So going from 100 amps to say 150, but if you're going to go to 150, you might as well go up to 200. So, okay, I think Tom went over this, which was the typical site visit. And I just wanted to make sure we covered our learning so far. So number one, most any home can be fully electrified without upsizing the electrical panel. And that's going to sound surprising to a lot of people, but we haven't found a home yet that we couldn't fully electrify on their existing panel. With the Wolf home, again, the pool heater was out of scope. If they wanted to do that, they could, but we're assuming if someone needs to have their pool heater heated, they could also afford the panel upgrade. So that's just something to note. Many contractors will tell people that they need to upsize their panel when in fact they don't yet. So a plan like the one we're providing these homeowners can help them defend their electrical panel. What does that mean? That means if the panel doesn't need to be upsized, it sort of provides the justification or the explanation to the contractors about how it can all be done. We're also seeing that there are some few key product choices that really make electrification very easy. 15 amp water heaters, these really low amperage inverter driven HVAC systems that also happen to be super quiet. Centrally ducted heat pump air handlers, like I showed you, where they're not the mini splits, that the ductless ones that go into every room, which can be more expensive. But this just swaps right into where your furnace is. And so you don't have to run as many refrigerant lines all throughout the house. It's just one refrigerant line run to the place where the furnace used to be. Lower amp EV charging is really critical. So avoid those 50 amp EV chargers. And then circuit sharing devices like a NeoCharge or a simple switch really give a lot of flexibility. And we did employ one of those in the design for the Wolf home. Split water heaters are a great solution for water heaters in tight spaces. So the tank can go in that interior closet, and then the compressor, which is why it's called split, is outside, similar to the heat pump HVAC systems. And then heat pump dryers, which I mentioned. And then finally, just continuing on with these learnings, you can electrify your pool heat or keep your 100 amp panel, but you probably can't do both. That was the example that we found with the Wolf home. Heating a pool for a home with a 100 amp panel is likely going to force that panel upgrade. Upsizing the water heater, yeah. So when someone goes, I think maybe you noticed, we recommended that the Wolves go from a 50 gallon gas water heater up to the 80 gallon heat pump water heater. That's because the recovery time on the heat pump water heaters is a little bit slower than the gas. So we wanted to make sure that they just didn't run out. And there's very little kind of efficiency hit or bill. In fact, they'll probably say a bill decrease actually going from the old gas water heater to the heat pump water heater. But there's very little penalty for upsizing the tank because the water heaters are so well insulated. They don't lose that heat. And then finally, avoid those old resistance dryers and be ready to swap them out for a heat pump dryer in order to avoid the panel upgrade. And then this is interesting. Insulation we used as just one tool in our electrification decarbonization toolkit. We didn't require that people do it. In many cases in homes, it's not actually part of our recommendations. We look at it, but it's not necessary. Finally,
Josie, I think we need to wrap up. So just one more final point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so just electrification is really not rocket science, but you can get steered down bad paths by contractors. And we really need more contractors who understand both how to sell heat pumps and want to do it, and understand the AMP diet concept. And there's just a lot of ways to achieve building electrification on an existing panel. Thank you.